Part 9. At the hospital. Patricia and Bobby sat vigilantly beside Sasa, refusing to leave even as night fell, waiting and praying for her to come out of her coma. Patricia had been crying profusely, her eyes swollen and red. Bobby, concerned for her well-being, gently urged her to go home and freshen up. After much pleading, Patricia reluctantly agreed, on the condition that Bobby promised to watch over Sasa until she returned. As soon as Patricia left, Bobby held Sasa's hand, his voice filled with regret and sorrow. "Sasa, my lovely daughter, I'm sorry for what I did to you. I'm the cause of your trouble due to the hatred I had for your height. Please come back to us, and let's fight this battle together. Please, Sasa, you need not give up now that the victory is near. I need you alive and well to see the end of your enemies." As he spoke and gently rubbed her palm, Sasa's eyelids fluttered, and she slowly became conscious. With a weak voice, she said, "Dad, I have been fighting my battles all alone because you failed me." Bobby burst into tears, overwhelmed by a mixture of guilt and relief. "Sasa, you're awake. Please forgive me. From henceforth, I will embrace my responsibility over you." Their emotional reunion was interrupted when Jack entered the room, his face lighting up with joy upon seeing Sasa awake. He rushed over, hugging Bobby and Sasa. Sasa, still weak, managed a small smile. "It's good to see you, Jack. I've missed you all." Jack quickly remembered Dr. Glory's instructions and hurried out to inform her. Dr. Glory had been adamant that she be notified immediately when Sasa regained consciousness to ensure her safety. As Jack raced down the hall, his mind buzzed with concern and anticipation. Back in the room, Bobby continued to speak softly to Sasa, promising to be there for her and protect her from now on. "We're going to get through this, Sasa. We'll find JJ and bring him home." Sasa's eyes filled with tears. "I hope so, Dad. I've been so worried about him." Meanwhile, as Jack reached Dr. Glory's office, he found her at the door about to leave. "Dr. Glory, she's awake. We need to ensure her safety immediately." Dr. Glory nodded, her expression serious. "I've already anticipated this. We need to move Sasa to a secure location within the hospital where she can recover without any threats. Let's act quickly." Back in Sasa's room, Bobby noticed a shadowy figure moving around the window. His heart raced as he realized they might still be in danger. He quickly locked the door and moved closer to Sasa, whispering, "Stay strong, Sasa. We're going to protect you no matter what." Moments later, Jack returned with Dr. Glory and a team of security guards. Dr. Glory approached Sasa, her expression both relieved and stern. "Sasa, we need to move you to a safer place. You're not out of danger yet." As they prepared to transfer Sasa, Bobby and Jack exchanged determined looks. "We're not going to let anything happen to her," Jack vowed. Bobby nodded. "No matter what it takes, we'll keep Sasa safe and find JJ." With tension high and threat still looming, they moved Sasa to a secure, undisclosed location within the hospital. Dr. Glory ensured that only trusted personnel were informed of Sasa's new location. As they wheeled Sasa through the corridors, Bobby and Jack walked beside her, their expressions a mix of resolve and worrying. As Sasa settled into the new room, Dr. Glory said, "We'll have security stationed outside her room at all times." Bobby sat by her side, never letting his guard down.
At JJ's school.
At Bristol Montessori International Nursery and Primary School, an undercover operation had been set in motion ever since Mr. Andrew provided clues that some teachers might be involved in feeding JJ suspicious substances. Miss Precious, the undercover agent, joined the school as a new teacher to keep everyone, including Mr. Andrew, in the dark about the investigation. One day after the assembly, Mr. Davis, one of the senior teachers, approached Miss Precious. "I've been watching you since you came into this school," he said, his eyes lingering on her. "I must confess, you are beautiful." "Oh, thank you, Mr. Davis," Miss Precious replied, trying to hide her discomfort. "Why have you been avoiding me?" Mr. Davis asked. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to study my new environment. If you don't mind, I would love to take you out for lunch today outside the school," Mr. Davis continued smoothly. "Let's get some taste that's different from the usual fare." "Thanks so much," Miss Precious responded, smiling. "It would be an honor for me to have lunch with my senior colleague." At the cafeteria, the conversation took an intriguing turn. Miss Precious decided to probe. "You must have other businesses you would be doing that make you more comfortable than all the teachers in the school. You ride the best cars, and your dressing is quite unique and different from everyone else. Definitely, your salary can't be your only source of income. You live big, Mr. Davis. Please count me in if you have any deals going." Mr. Davis laughed. "You look innocent, but it seems you are smarter than I thought. Our salary scale is small, so I opened up to every opportunity that comes my way to meet my daily needs as a family man." "So, Mr. Davis, what type of business are you into?" Miss Precious asked, leaning in. "Miss Precious, there are no clean deals out there anymore, so we must be determined to make money at all costs. I'll tell you something, the best way to get money is to get your cut from the rich while you clean up the trace." Miss Precious, recording all the conversations discreetly, felt a thrill of excitement. She was close to unraveling the criminal acts within the school premises against JJ. After school, she approached Mr. Davis eagerly. "Is there any deal today so I can join you?" Mr. Davis laughed, amused by her enthusiasm. "Yes, I must check what's going on with JJ before I get back home." Miss Precious, feigning a worried look, asked, "JJ? Who's JJ? And what's going on with him?" Mr. Davis smirked. "I will tell you more about him as we drive on." As they drove, Precious kept her composure, her mind racing with the potential breakthrough. "You mean you don't know about JJ? Are you new in this town? Don't you know about Dr. Sasser?" Precious, with a frowned face, said, "Oh, that popular dwarf doctor that her son JJ escaped death." "Yes, you are there. We are the one in charge of him. In fact, we decide whether he leaves or is dead," Davis responded. "You mean the death he escaped, which was all over the news?" Precious questioned. "Miss Precious, just calm down, I will tell you all about him." Davis patted her back. "Wow, you are quite big. Please, I'm interested in the deal." Davis responded, "Like I said, get your cut from the rich and clean up the trace." They arrived at a discreet location near the school, where Mr. Davis led her to a separate staff room. "JJ is part of a bigger plan," Mr. Davis explained. "He's our leverage. We keep an eye on him and do as we're instructed." Miss Precious's heart pounded. She needed to extract more information without blowing her cover. "What's our next step?" Mr. Davis grinned, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Patience, Miss Precious, all in good time. For now, just follow my lead, and you'll see how lucrative this can be. You can actually get more than your 1 month's salary in a day." Suddenly, they overheard footsteps coming towards them, interrupted their conversation. They sighted Mr. Andrew coming, looking suspiciously at Precious. "What's going on here, Davis?" Mr. Andrew asked, his voice tense. Thinking quickly, Precious stepped forward. "Mr. Andrew, We were just discussing some extracurricular activities for the students, she lied smoothly. Mr. Davis was showing me the best way to engage them. Mr. Andrews' eyes narrowed, but he nodded slowly. Very well, but be careful, both of you. There are rumors going around. After Mr. Andrew left, Precious asked if Mr. Andrew was part of his crew. Mr. Davis said, "No, Andrew talks too much, and he can't be trusted for a task like this." Mr. Davis then made a call. "Boss, I have gotten someone that can disguise as his mother's friend to avoid any panic from the boy's end. Since we need him alive to proceed with our plans, we need someone he could run to innocently as his mother's friend for safety." A voice on the other end replied, "Oh, okay, noted. Remember, we need not mess up this move. We are closer to the big shot that would definitely earn us big rewards." Miss Precious listened intently, her mind racing. She had to get this information to the authorities before it was too late. As they continued their conversation, she mentally planned her next move, determined to bring down the criminals and protect JJ at all costs. She excused herself, saying she needed to use the convenience. Mr. Davis said, "That would be later. We need to move out of this place now, Precious." She nodded as they drove out of the area. He dropped her in her house, promised to keep her posted on the deal.
At Sassa's house.
Patricia arrived home tired, muttering a heartfelt prayer. "Oh God, protect my daughter Sassa, and put all her enemies to shame." Zara, who was coming out of the utility room, overheard her mother's prayers and said, "Omen, Mom, how is Sassa?" Zara asked, her voice filled with concern. Patricia responded, "She's good, and I believe she will come out of all these ordeals unhurt." "I must rush out now. I have an appointment to catch up with," Zara said, grabbing her bag. "Okay, my dear. See you later," Patricia replied. As Zara locked the entrance door behind her, Patricia went to secure it with the inner lock, muttering to herself, "No one comes in without my knowledge. I must lay my hands on her diary today." Determined, she went straight to the utility room to search for the diary, but was surprised to find it nowhere. She then headed to Zara's room, searching her wardrobe and under her bed. Just as she was about to leave the room, Patricia had an urge to check the bathroom. Entering, she spotted the diary in the waste bin. Shaking her head in disbelief, she picked it up and went to the living room to read its contents. Sitting on the couch, Patricia flipped through the pages, snapping photos of vital information related to Sassa, Jack, and JJ. Why would Zara be fighting against her twin sister? She questioned herself. I must get to the root of this. Quickly, she freshened up and prepared to return the diary to its hiding place before heading back to the hospital. The information she had uncovered was crucial, and she needed to act swiftly to protect Sassa. Kamsi's interrogation. Detective Daniel had been questioning Kamsi for hours about her involvement in the sinister plot against Sassa and JJ. Initially, Kamsi refused to talk, but as the pressure mounted, she began to crack. The weight of the interrogation finally broke her silence. "I promised my mom we would take revenge for her and free her from prison," Kamsi began, her voice trembling. "My aim was to kill JJ, so I collaborated with one of the teachers at his school to feed him tomatoes, knowing he's allergic to them. Shortly after, a prominent personality in this city contacted me to kill Sassa as well, claiming that since I'm her aunt, it would be easier for me to take care of her with no trace. I agreed to go that extent because of the pay and the connection I would get from it. Moreover, her outstanding success is a threat to me and the family at large." Detective Daniel leaned forward, his face stern. "And who were the teachers you worked with at Bristol Montessori Nursery and Primary School. His name is Davis, Kamsi replied. Daniel pressed on. How did you know that JJ was allergic to tomatoes? I found out through Sasses, Kamsi started, but then she began coughing violently. Water was given to her, and she asked to use the restroom. Daniel, suspicious but accommodating, directed her to the convenience. Make it quick, he warned. A few minutes later, Daniel instructed his officers to check on Kamsi. They reported that she was still in the restroom. Growing impatient, Daniel ordered a female staff member to open the door. When they did, they found Kamsi lifeless on the floor. Panic set in as they rushed her to the ICU at International Hospital, where the best medical personnel worked tirelessly to save her life. Daniel contacted Bobby, Kamsi's elder brother, who reported her and engaged the service of Detective Daniel. Bobby, who had been at the hospital watching over Sasa, rushed to meet him at the ICU. Daniel briefed him on how Kamsi was found lifeless in the restroom and how far the medical practitioners had helped to stabilize her. Bobby appreciated Daniel for his efforts and urged him to do his best to get to the root of the issue. Daniel stood outside the ICU, frustration engraved in his face. She can't die now. We need to know who that prominent person is. We must get to the root of Sas's problems. Back at the office, Daniel gathered his team. We need to dig deeper. Davis is our next lead. Bring him in for questioning immediately. As officers moved to apprehend Davis, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing a critical piece of the puzzle. The prominent figure Kamsi mentioned was still out there, pulling strings. Davis was brought in and placed in an interrogation room. Daniel entered, his eyes piercing. Mr. Davis, you're in a lot of trouble. We know about your involvement with Kamsi and the plot against JJ. It's in your best interest to cooperate. Davis, sensing the gravity of the situation, began to sweat. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. Don't play dumb with me. Kamsi already confessed. You can either help us and get a lighter sentence, or we can make sure you never see daylight again. Davis broke under the pressure. All right. I helped her, but it was just for the money. I didn't know she was going to kill him. Who's the prominent figure she mentioned? Daniel demanded. Davis hesitated, then whispered, I don't know his name. He only goes by the benefactor. He contacted Kamsi directly. She never told me much about him. Back at the hospital, Kamsi was still unconscious. Doctors were working tirelessly to stabilize her. Daniel visited the ICU, looking through the glass at Kamsi. He knew time was running out. Suddenly, Daniel's phone rang. It was one of his officers. Sir, we've traced a call from Kamsi's phone to a number linked to several criminal activities from the data Bobby gave us earlier. We think it's the benefactor. Good work, Daniel replied. Keep digging. We need to find this person. As Daniel returned to the office, his mind raced with possibilities. The connection between Kamsi, Davis, and the benefactor was becoming clearer, but we needed solid evidence to bring the entire network down.
At the warehouse.
Detective Scott asked, Why are you here alone? Zara, what are you doing here? Zara hesitated, her eyes darting around the room. I came to help JJ. I'm here to save him. Scott's eyes narrowed. Why should I believe you? How can you be here all alone to rescue your nephew from a team of kidnappers? How did you get to know about this place? What's really going on here? Zara responded, I was at home all alone when I heard a knock on the door. On getting there, I found this letter. She brought out a letter from her trousers pocket. It contained the details of the warehouse where JJ was kept, and it was written that I should come here alone to get him without informing any authority if I want him alive. With great desperation, I ran here to get him. Though I knew it was dangerous, I chose to come for his rescue. Detective Scott studied the letter, then looked back at Zara. "You've done a great job," he said, finally. Zara smiled weakly. "JJ is my nephew. I can do anything for him." Scott nodded. "We must leave this place now." Both turned to where JJ was standing, and to everyone's astonishment, he was nowhere to be found. One of Scott's crew said, "I saw him urinating a few minutes ago." Scott instructed his crew to search through the bushes and around the warehouse. The minutes stretched on, the tension mounting as each search party returned empty-handed. The warehouse, with its eerie, dim lighting and the rustling sounds from the surrounding forest, only added to the growing sense of dread. Zara burst into tears, shifting the blame onto Scott. "If you had acted faster, JJ would still be with us." Scott remained calm, though the weight of the situation bore heavily on him. "We need to stay focused," he said, rallying his team. "The kidnappers are smart, but we can outsmart them. We need to think about where they could have taken him and act quickly." Suddenly, Scott's phone rang. It was an anonymous number. He answered, and a distorted voice said, "You think you can save him? You're too late. You'll never find him." The call ended abruptly, leaving everyone in stunned silence. Scott looked at Zara, determination in his eyes. "We will find him," he vowed. Zara, though still distraught, nodded. "What's our next move?" Scott turned to his team. "We need to track that call. It's our best lead." Meanwhile, back at the warehouse, one of the crew members found a small abandoned backpack near the perimeter. Inside was a note, "You're getting closer, but can you keep up?" Suddenly, there was a muffled sound, like a whimper, coming from somewhere within the dark, foreboding forest. Scott motioned for silence, listening intently. The cry came again, clearer this time. It was indeed JJ. They followed the sound, moving stealthily through the dense undergrowth, their flashlights barely piercing the darkness. Zara's anguish overflowed, and she turned to Scott, her voice trembling. "You should have acted faster, by taking JJ out of here first instead of concentrating on me. You have made my coming amount to naught now. JJ's gone again." Scott placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his voice steady. "We will find him, Zara. We're getting closer." As they left the warehouse empty-handed, a sense of loss hung heavy in the air. Both Scott and Zara were consumed by sadness and regret, knowing that JJ was once again in the clutches of his captors. Back at Bristol Montessori International Nursery and Primary School, chaos reigned when Mrs. Davis arrived early in the morning to inform the school management about her husband's arrest. She recounted the previous night's events. "We were chatting on the veranda when the gate bell rang. My husband went to attend to the visitor, and 3 young men followed him into the compound. They demanded to see Mr. Davis, my husband, who was still beside them, gladly responded that he was the one. It was then that the 3 men introduced themselves as detectives and asked for his presence at their office. Mrs. Davis pleaded with the school management to help secure her husband's release, insisting on his innocence. "I know he's innocent. Please, we need to do something fast." The staff gathered in small groups, whispering and gossiping about the arrest. Miss Precious, however, was furious. She knew she was close to rescuing JJ. She reported the new development to her office, urging, "We need to team up with the private investigator." Davis had a direct link to JJ, and we need to act fast now. Inspector Peller immediately called Detective Daniel and requested the transfer of Davis' case, explaining that their team had been investigating it for a while. He informed Daniel about the undercover operation at the school. Daniel promised to drop Mr. Davis at the police station himself. Upon arrival, Davis was put in a cell while Inspector Peller and his team met with Detective Daniel. They discussed their various findings about Davis and vowed to do whatever it took to ensure that Sasa and her son JJ were safe. At the end of the meeting, Daniel demanded to see Davis to share more information, wanting to let him know that he had additional details about him from the police. However, when they reached the cell, they found Davis unconscious on the floor. Panic ensued as they rushed him to the International Hospital. Upon examination, the doctors pronounced him dead. Daniel, visibly shaken, exclaimed, "What's killing all of them?" The same thing happened when Kamsi was about to let out vital information. The doctors examined the samples from Davis and Kamsi and discovered the same deadly substance in both samples. Inspector Peller, his face grim, said, "We must find out what's going on with them. How is the substance getting to them? And who's responsible for this?" The tension in the room was high. Everyone was acutely aware that there was a dangerous game afoot, and they were racing against time.
Back at the school.
Mrs. Davis was inconsolable at the news of the demise of her husband. Precious, though burdened with the weight of the unfolding events, tried to comfort her. "We'll get to the bottom of this," she promised. Mrs. Davis felt devastated by her husband's involvement in such a criminal case. She explained how Dr. Sasa worked tirelessly to save their only son, who was born with a terminal illness, without knowing that her husband was the one responsible for her pain. How could a teacher, who is supposed to keep a child away from danger, be the one pushing him into danger? "I'm so disappointed in my husband and pray that God rescues JJ safely and brings healing to Sasa." Precious tried to get some information from her that could help to find JJ, while they promised to check on her again. Meanwhile, Detective Daniel, Inspector Peller, and Miss Precious sat down to analyze their findings, hoping to uncover clues that could lead them to JJ. "We need to be extra careful," Peller warned. "Whoever is behind this is extremely cunning and won't hesitate to kill again." The room fell silent as the gravity of the discussion sank in. They had to act swiftly and with precision. Precious, her mind racing, realized the only way forward was to uncover the mastermind behind the kidnappings. She was determined to see this through, no matter the cost.
At Sasa's house.
Scott drove Zara home to ensure her safety before heading to his own place. "We'll find JJ soon, don't worry," he assured her. As soon as Zara got inside, she locked all the doors securely, her heart pounding with the rush of the recent events. She crashed on the couch, exhaling deeply with a smirk. "Kudos to me," she muttered, a self-satisfied grin spreading across her face. "I played my game smartly." Scott would have caught me red-handed, if not for that fake letter. Thank goodness for that stroke of genius. Just as she was celebrating her success, her phone rang. She answered quickly, recognizing the number. A cold, stern voice came through the line. "Zara, you need to be smarter. Kamsi has been caught and has let out some vital information that the authorities are working on right now. She's lying almost lifeless at the hospital. Mr. Davis is dead, because he was about to reveal crucial information as well. You need to be very careful now to avoid ending up like them." The voice continued, "Remember, when you are caught, you must be erased. The boss can do anything to protect his identity and his interests. So far, you've done well, and JJ is being delivered to the boss. If you are needed for anything else, you will be contacted. But don't forget to keep us posted on any new developments from your end. Zara felt a mixture of excitement and fear, and she said to herself, I've come this far. She whispered to herself, I can't falter now. Just then, a thought struck her. She needed to ensure that no loose ends were left. She pulled out her diary, flipping through the pages filled with names and details, trying to determine if there were any potential threats she had overlooked. Every detail mattered now more than ever, she muttered. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text message. Keep an eye on Scott. He's more resourceful than we anticipated. Zara's eyes narrowed. Scott, okay. As the night wore on, Zara's thoughts were interrupted by another call. This time, it was the boss himself. His voice, cold and commanding, sent shivers down her spine. You've done well, Zara, but remember, one misstep and you're expendable. Keep us informed, and don't let your guard down. JJ's fate is now in our hands, and soon, everything will fall into place as planned. Zara ended the call. With a deep breath, she resolved to stay one step ahead of everyone. Meanwhile, the boss's words echoed in her mind. Remember, when you are caught, you must be erased. Her eyes glinted with determination as she whispered, let the game continue. At the hospital. Sasa lay weak in her hospital bed, instructed by the doctors to avoid any conversation for now. Bobby and Patricia sat beside her, cracking little jokes and occasionally rubbing her palm. Their presence seemed to help, as Sasa was reportedly getting better day by day. The security around her was tight, with everyone on high alert to guard her from any trouble. Jack was sitting at the reception when Detective Michael Scott arrived at the hospital. Jack welcomed him, frustration evident on his face. I couldn't call to check on you based on the agreement to keep off the scene, he said. So what happened? Where is my son? Scott looked down, unable to meet Jack's eyes as he recounted the events at the warehouse. When he mentioned that Zara was present at the warehouse to save JJ, Jack was stunned. How did she know about all that? He demanded. Scott handed him the letter Zara had shown. Jack scrutinized it, suspicion growing. Are you sure she wasn't up to something? I don't trust that move 100%. Scott, you mean you saw JJ, you held his hand, you spoke with him, and then he disappeared? Jack's anger flared. He started shouting at Scott angrily. Scott, I need my son alive. Your best isn't enough. I need my son alive. As he was screaming, Patricia came out to get some food and drinks for them. She was shocked to find Jack so angry at Scott, while one doctor tried to calm the situation. Patricia asked the doctor to leave them alone, then turned to Jack. What's going on? She asked. Jack, his voice trembling with emotion, explained everything Scott had told him. Patricia burst into tears and pleaded with Scott to do everything within his power to help. Thoughts raced through Jack's and Patricia's minds simultaneously. Jack knew that Zara didn't mean well for her sister, and her supposed bravery in finding JJ only confused him more. Patricia, recalling everything she had read in Zara's diary, concluded that Zara's actions were for their family's good. Patricia immediately called Zara. Zara, my darling, thank you so much for risking your life for JJ yesterday. That was incredibly brave, thank you. Zara replied casually, Mom, I'm grateful for the opportunity to prove my involvement to you. I'm sure we will find JJ soon. Both laughed on the phone before ending the call. As Patricia hung up, a chilling realization settled over her. Something was off, but she couldn't quite place it. She vowed to keep a close eye on Zara, knowing that the safety of her family depended on it. Meanwhile, Scott and Jack were deep in conversation, plotting their next move to find JJ.
At her Daniel's office.
Detective Daniel sat at his desk, his mind racing with disturbing thoughts. How could the same deadly substance be found in both Kamsi and Davis? Kamsi was still battling for her life, while Davis was already dead. What was the connection? Picking up his phone, he called Bobby. "We must meet now. It is crucial and urgent. Please come to my office." Bobby, who was driving back to the hospital, promised to be with him in a few minutes. Arrived at his office, concern engraved on his face. Daniel, looking both serious and confused, began, "Who's the insider working with Kamsi?" She wasn't operating alone. She mentioned a prominent person in the city, a team of assassins, and Davis from JJ's school. When she was about to mention a close family member's name, she started coughing and couldn't let out the information before becoming unconscious. Bobby's mind immediately went to Zara, but he didn't want to implicate his daughter without more evidence. Besides, he was uncertain about the status of their relationship. Daniel's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. "I need a clue."
He said it's someone close to Sasa who knew about JJ's tomato allergy.
That information is crucial, and I never knew about it until this case started, Bobby said. Daniel instructed Bobby to conduct an underground investigation to identify the insider. "We must find out who it is. It would go a long way in helping us solve this case. Another thing, I need to know who the high-profile person that wants Sasa dead is. Do you know anyone she might have had a conflict with?" Bobby shook his head. "No, I can't think of anyone. I pray that Kamsi recovers so she can give us more details and help end this nightmare once and for all." Detective Daniel assured Bobby, "We'll get to the bottom of this. My team and I are working tirelessly to unravel this case." As Bobby left Daniel's office, he couldn't shake off the nagging suspicion about Zara. He was torn between his protective instincts and the need for truth. Sighed deeply, "I don't trust Zara's involvement, but I need solid evidence before making any accusations."
At Joy's place.
Joy couldn't sleep the entire night, her mind racing with worrying about the task Marco had assigned her. As dawn broke, a message from Marco pinged on her phone, instructing her to meet a driver at 6 a.m. The message included a specific location and a stern warning: "You will be penalized if you are a minute late." Joy's heart pounded, but she knew she had no choice but to comply. She quickly jumped out of bed, dressed, and left for the location. She arrived 5 minutes early and, precisely at 6 a.m., a car pulled up. Sensing this was the vehicle she had been waiting for, she approached it cautiously. The driver showed Marco's ID card, and she immediately got in. As they drove to the location of the assigned task, Joy focused intensely, determined to stay on top of the game. After a few hours, she completed the task and called Marco to inform him of her success. Marco sounded elated and praised her, saying, "You are quite exceptional, Joy. No new recruit has completed such a task without sustaining an injury. My boss wants to have dinner with you tonight." Joy's emotions were filled of fear and excitement. Knowing Marco's notorious and deadly reputation, she was unsure what to expect from a meeting with his boss. "I never knew Marco had a boss," she thought. "If Marco is this dangerous, what kind of person could his boss be?" As she contemplated the upcoming dinner, Her thoughts wandered to the various possibilities. What kind of person commands Marco? What will they want from her? Joy knew she had to be prepared for anything. She decided to gather her wits and approach the dinner with caution and confidence. Later that evening, Joy dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that was both professional and understated. She wanted to make a good impression, but not draw too much attention. Arriving at the designated restaurant, she felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. The restaurant was upscale, with dim lighting and an air of exclusivity. As she entered, a hostess led her to a private room in the back. The room was elegantly decorated, with a large table set for an intimate dinner. Marco was already there, sitting beside a tall, imposing figure who exuded power and control. "Joy, meet Mr. Blackwood," Marco introduced, his tone unusually deferential. Mr. Blackwood extended a hand, his gaze piercing as he studied her. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Joy. I've heard impressive things about your work." Joy shook his hand, her mind racing as she tried to gauge his intentions. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I'm honored to be here." As the dinner progressed, Mr. Blackwood asked Joy about her background, her skills, and her ambitions. She answered carefully, aware that every word mattered. The conversation was both engaging and tense, with Mr. Blackwood revealing little about himself while extracting as much information from Joy as possible. By the end of the dinner, Joy felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had escaped through the evening without making any missteps, but she knew that her association with Marco and Mr. Blackwood was far from over. As she left the restaurant, Marco pulled her aside. "Joy, you've made a good impression tonight. Keep up the good work, and you'll go far." Joy nodded, her mind filled with questions and uncertainties.
At the hospital.
Jack sat in the reception area, his body slumped with the weight of the burden he carried. He had been dozing off, trying to escape the relentless whirring for just a moment, when his phone rang. Startled, he picked up the call, his eyes still heavy with fatigue. "Hello," Jack answered, his voice thick with exhaustion. A male voice on the other end stated, "We are releasing JJ to you on the condition that you sign the documents. You have 7 hours to make your decision, but we advise that you choose wisely." Jack's brow furrowed in confusion. "Which documents are you talking about?" he inquired. The voice replied, "Check beside you. You'll see a brown envelope. The documents are in there. Sign it and get your son back." Jack's heart raced as he noticed the brown envelope beside him, wondering how it got there. Then, a voice spoke from the phone, "Dad, please sign the documents. I want to come back home." "JJ, is that you?" Jack's voice trembled with emotion. "I missed you." The male voice responded sternly, "Make a wise decision. He escaped death the first time. He may not be that lucky this time." With that, the call ended. Jack's palms were sweaty as he agonized over whether to open the document without involving the police. Meanwhile, JJ's plea echoed in his mind, urging him to make a choice. Jack sat there, torn between his love for his son and the fear of what the documents might entail. JJ's words echoed in his mind. After a moment of hesitation, Jack reached for the brown envelope beside him. His hands trembled slightly as he slowly peeled it open, revealing the contents within. His heart raced as he scanned the papers.
At the hospital.
Dr. Hakim resumed his duties after 2 days off, feeling somewhat refreshed, and was happy to be back on duty as he was exchanging pleasantries with everyone around. As he made his way to his office, he overheard a snippet of a conversation between two policemen. "I've dropped the envelope beside Jack, but we need to take care of Sasa tonight, so she won't stand as a roadblock to us. If Sasa is out, Jack will definitely sign the documents immediately, one of them said, while the other nodded his head in agreement. Hakeem's heart skipped a beat. He quickly recorded part of the conversation on his phone and hurried into his office, his mind racing. Sweat began to bead on his forehead as he realized the gravity of the situation. He couldn't think straight, but knew he had to save Sasa, no matter the cost. I have no time for any long plan, he muttered to himself, but I must make sure Sasa is safe. He quickly accessed Sasa's file and changed the name of the doctor scheduled to attend to her that evening to his own, ensuring he would have direct access to her. Knowing the ward would be quiet at that time, he prepared a baby stretcher and disguised Sasa on it. His heart pounded as he managed to put her in his car successfully. As he approached the hospital gate, Dr. Hakeem tried to appear calm. However, just then, the doctor originally scheduled to attend to Sasa discovered her absence. "I can't find Dr. Sasa in her private ward," he shouted, his voice echoing through the corridors. Panic spread like wildfire as staff and security began searching frantically. Instructions were quickly given to the gateman to search all outgoing vehicles. Dr. Hakeem's car was stopped. "I have an emergency. Please let me through," he urged, but the gateman, acting on strict orders, insisted on checking the car. Peering inside, the gateman's eyes widened in shock upon seeing a human figure under the blankets. When the gateman uncovered the face of the figure, he was astonished to see it was Dr. Sasa. "Dr. Hakeem, what is going on here?" he demanded, immediately alerting the authorities. Despite Dr. Hakeem's desperate pleas, explaining that Dr. Sasa's life was in danger, and he was trying to protect her, the authorities refused to listen. The scene became chaotic as Dr. Hakeem was handcuffed and led to a police car, accused of attempting to kidnap Dr. Sasa. Hospital staff and onlookers watched in disbelief as he was taken away, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on everyone present. Stay tuned for part 10.